A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back once again to films I'm willing to talk about again. So, for this instance, what we're going to do here is today, we're going to cap off this whole entire How to Train Your Dragon saga that I've been covering for this entire week. And well, we of course can't talk about much else with the other films. So, How to Train Your Dragon 3. The third film in the How to Train Your Dragon series, at least by the mainline standards, with all the other stuff basically being other continuities and remakes and all that good stuff. All these different expansions to the franchise just to catch on to the name itself. But you know what? Before a majority of that happened, this is basically what we had. And the way I see it, this was an unexpected surprise in contrast to when I was basically begging Universal all the time since How to Train Your Dragon Part 1 was released to get a sequel. But then of course came another sequel, something that totally surprised me out of the bat. But you know what? In 2019, this was definitely something worthy of my time. But if there was one thing that kind of disappointed me, I never once got the chance to see it in theaters. However, because of my subscription to YouTube Premium, I was actually able to snag a great deal on the third film in full HD. So, I could definitely thank YouTube for basically giving me a nice big chance to watch the film for myself while at home, taking advantage of the next best thing to do to watch movies. And while people will still agree, the theater is an experience that can never be truly taken over. But the way I see it, it's more about tomorrow than yesterday. Anyways though, How to Train Your Dragon 3 does in fact retain all of the original feel that we had gotten from most of the franchise thus far. It was in fact directed by Dean DeBlois, music was composed by John Powell, and was also a really big success in the box office, earning over $525 million, and contrary to the other two films, which had earned a bit more. But still, it's a big success in its own way. And speaking of John Powell and his soundtrack composition for this film, I'd say in this instance, he definitely nails it in comparison to the other two films. And if there's one thing that we can truly agree with, the Hidden World Suite was certainly one of the best things we had ever heard in the whole year of 2019. And there were loads of great songs that came out during that not so great year. So we at least had a few nice highlights from that whole year that thankfully had come and gone. So, you know, bad years are nothing worth dawdling on those. So anyways, How to Train Your Dragon 3, simply put, is another big expansion and time skip to a certain point in the future, where the lives of Hiccup, Astrid, Fishlegs, Snotlout, Rough, Tough, Gobber, and all the other residents of the town of Berg, along with all of their fellow dragons that they ride on and explore the world with, they basically have yet another arc in the franchise. This time, however, it is for, in fact, a rival of theirs. A rival whom is, in fact, much like what we've seen with the likes of Drago and the Queen from the first film, this guy is basically no joke, you know? He actually goes so far to conquer in a whole different way. I mean, the whole movie itself starts off with an unexpected twist of events. You have the likes of Hiccup, Astrid, and the others basically being these somewhat rusty yet capable warriors that they are. They do in fact go so far to conquer an enemy territory. Yep, hostile as those guys may be, they actually managed to pull some wits and some sick moves like we never seen before. It truly gives us an amazing feel as to how these characters have developed over the years, and even more so when you get to know all the pain and suffering and challenges that they've been through, much like their ancestors have. But of course, it's the same old stuff that we've seen in the other films. But the whole thing is that Hiccup's even older, is now growing more facial hair on him, having a full beard in fact, and with the others, similar things are in fact kicking off. So it does seem that a lot of things are willing to go in a way that we never thought of. Hiccup, of course, was promoted to Chief of Berk after his father, Stoic the Vast, passing from the last film. Since, after all, he died to save Hiccup after Toothless and the other dragons were basically corrupted by the wildebeest's magic, basically. Some special powers of some sort. But in any case, though, it at least has gone on quite well for Hiccup, being that he has unexpectedly done a lot of things to help shape Berk into an even better township than it used to be, even before all this stuff had gone wrong. But hey, don't really take my word for it. They say it's better to just go in and watch the movie yourself. But of course, some things can't exactly go the way it should. Because like I've said, there is in fact another rival for the likes of Hiccup and his crew to go after. And, well, of course I have some notes written about the whole thing. But for the most part, what I can say, it's a story of a lifetime. You know, you have Hiccup and Toothless basically going so far as to do their own special explorations. But soon enough, they come across, believe it or not, a certain unknown dragon. Something that had never once been seen before. And when they get a closer look, well, it is, believe it or not, a light fury. Yep, the polar opposite of the night fury, the light fury. And when you think about it, this really is something that we have practically been waiting for a while. We never had quite expected to see something as impressive as something that is of Toothless's own likelihood. I mean, the likeness of Toothless is considered extremely rare, knowing the fact that the Night Fury itself is already a near endangered species. But the fact is that it was considered to be that he was the only one of his kind. But of course, now that we have a Light Fury, it does seem that there actually is hope. The hope to continue his race. The hope to continue his livelihood. And the hope to basically keep his bloodline going. And well, just as you might expect, it does actually go off his way. Of course, we know that this is the part where the famous Hidden World Suite kicks in. And boy, does it play off amazingly well with the performances, because when Hiccup basically watches them, he definitely gets a good observation, knowing that Toothless, the Light Fury, they actually seem like they are truly meant to be together, much like with him and Astrid, since they do in fact plan on getting married one day, just as Stoic the Vast himself had once visualized years ago. But you know what? It doesn't quite get any much better, because like I've said, this other guy, whom is of course simply known as Grimald the Grizzly, he basically does in fact have quite a reputation for capturing dragons, mostly for the negatives in life. It's quite similar to what we saw with Drago, but instead of possessing the dragons, he intends to use the dragons for some of his own demonic needs. I mean, you'd think that it's crazy. And well, it turns out that the Light Fury, believe it or not, well, apparently the reason why she was brought out to Toothless in the first place, why they encountered each other, was apparently when, well, it's apparently a bait scheme that Grimald was putting together. And the thing is, not only that, he actually gets captured. Yep. And well, Grimald of course does proceed with his capture, and it seems that all hope is lost. But as we know, a lot of these actions just cannot go unpunished. Because the capturing of the dragons certainly was a bad move. And it does seem that the stakes are raised even higher, knowing the fact that it's not just Toothless that's captured, but also many of the other dragons as well. The dragons of Berk, a town that's already overpopulated with dragons, they somehow managed to get a hold of them. And that definitely is a telltale sign that they certainly are not messing around. Unlike what we saw with the Queen, or Drago, or Idel, or Idef, basically. This guy here definitely has a lot of skill and a lot of intellect, much like we saw with Hiccup and the rest. So, the wits of his and the tenacity of his are surely one for the senses. One that really makes you feel sorry for Hiccup and his crew. I mean, it really is quite a challenge. How are they going to defeat a dragon capturer, a warlord of a new degree compared to what we saw with Drago? Well, it's simple. If they can't use dragon wings, then they use their own wings that they themselves had created. You see, Hiccup's not the only guy to have his own set of leather wings. A wingsuit, basically. Quite a technology that's ahead of its time, considering that How to Train Your Dragon does have its own senses with the likes of the Nordic times and the Middle Ages, basically somewhere between the 12th and 14th centuries. But it's still impressive when you think about it. It's a lot like what we saw with Shrek, where they had a lot of things going on in that sort of Middle Age time period where fantasy was a pretty common thing at that time, with princesses and dragons and knights and ogres and all kinds of crazy magical stuff. I mean, How to Train Your Dragon does give off similar vibes to what we saw with Shrek, but here they don't entirely make it all about comedy, and they technically do allow the technological aspects in regards to the historical era that they're featured in to be a little more on the concise yet impressive side of things. It almost does give you the feeling that perhaps at some point a wingsuit was indeed created during that time period. I mean, let's not forget, Leonardo da Vinci was the same man who came up with the helicopter way back in the 16th century. That's something we cannot forget about, you know? Why we have helicopters today, many centuries later, is because of his work. Of course, it was a concept back in the 1500s, but still, you can't really go wrong with it. And you know what? The battle, in this case though, compared to what we saw in the other films, is epic. So far ahead of what we already know from the other films. And then of course, while the Berkians basically do allow for this hidden world that they discovered, a world full of dragons in its own way, not exactly like what we saw with Valka from the other film, where she had her own cave full of a home for the dragons themselves, but this hidden world that they found was something way out of the ordinary, you know? Like something you'd never know. But of course, with the final battle that goes on, starting with some annoyance from Rough Nuts, otherwise simply known as Ruff, to be more simpler, and well, while Rough Nut unfortunately does end up giving away the location of their new hideout, basically, after the capturing of the dragons took place, that's basically what eventually goes down. Stormfly, thankfully, is able to find Toothless. And while, after all that stuff goes down, Grimmel basically has had enough. He intends to kill Toothless himself. But, thankfully, while all that goes down, they do in fact have another partner by their side. You see, the Light Fury doesn't actually want to get involved with Grimmel's crap, you know? She wants to be with Toothless, you know? She might have been used as bait, but that's just basically what it is. She was used for an evil deed, something that she never wanted to do in the first place. So she willingly decides to go after her owner instead. And that is epic. quite a way to end a battle in a climactic way. Like, could you get any better than that? I don't really know for sure. I wouldn't say that it's that climactic. It sure is a lot better than, simply put, a simple fall from a warlord and his giant dragon. Or maybe you could say it's probably even better than the fact that, well, a queen dragon ends up falling to the earth and explodes in a ball of fire, taking Hiccup with her. Almost. But in this case, though, it sure is quite a celebration that goes down. And in the end, after it's all over, the marriage of Hiccup and Astrid are finally put together. And the celebration itself, the wedding goes down, time passes yet again, but this time it's a different formula. Time without Toothless is once again apparent. But we learn that Hiccup and Astrid apparently have children. Yep. It's a new generation of warriors-to-be, if you will. Who knows, if a How to Train Your Dragon 4 ever becomes a thing, they might start using these new characters that are in fact descendants of the likes of Hiccup and Astrid. But even when that happens, we still have one more loose end to tie up. And thankfully, the movie shows us just that. Toothless and the Light Fury apparently are close by. And when they encounter each other for the first time in a while, Hiccup proceeds to introduce his children to Toothless, the Light Fury, and apparently they've also given birth to their own offspring. So, coincidence? I suppose not. But nonetheless, this is still an amazing turn of events that we had not quite realized would happen. I mean, there has been talks about the marriage and all that, but the fact the movie goes so far to just simply show us all these new things that go down, I mean, you have the wedding itself, but now you have a point where potentially new characters in the franchise could in fact be revealed and used later on in the franchise. And well, believe it or not, there actually was a certain offspring of Toothless and the Night Fury, which wasn't clearly shown, known as Thunder. Yeah, if you're familiar with How to Train Your Dragons, The Nine Realms, well, a Netflix series along with a video game adaptation that both came out in 2022, they both simply gave us a unique opportunity to explore one particular member of the offspring of Toothless and the Light Fury, which basically is none other than Thunder, who's basically a mixture of both of their color schemes. So, quite a nice hybrid if you ask me. But that itself is a different story. And overall, I will say this movie is a definite masterpiece in its own right. Probably in between the likes of 1 and 2, but still, a good 8.8 out of 10.1. Phenomenal soundtrack, nice world building like the other film did, and good ways to simply cap off on a trilogy note that we'll certainly never forget. And I will see you guys with more content later on in films I'm willing to talk about again.
Whenever I want, I usually get, and I'm thinking I want you, but I don't have you yet. I ain't got no tricks to be playing on you.